Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Verse number 5. Vrittishvetasu sarvasu.
Vrittishvetasu sarvasu.
Brahmanaschit svabhavata.
Brahmanaschit svabhavata.
Pratibimbati shantasu.
Pratibimbati shantasu.
Sukhancha Pratibimbati.
Sukhancha pratibimbati.
Vrittishu etasu sarvasu. Sarvasu, in all. What vrittis? What's a vritti?
Thought modification.
A thought modification, a modification of the mind, a thought form, or in this case, also by extension, the particular state of the mind of the three we have been discussing. What are they? Shanta, Ghora, Mood. So this is also, these are the three general vrittis, and in these vrittis, what happens? Brahmanaha, of Brahman, Chit Swabhavata, the consciousness which is Brahman. And like I said, this is, it's not that Brahman has a property called consciousness. Brahman is consciousness. And so, the consciousness is present in all these vrittis. How do we know?
Because we are.
We observe.
Yeah, because we are aware. We are aware that right now Shanta vritti is far away. We are aware that right now Ghora vritti is taking over. So that is how that awareness is there in all the vrittis. That is how one is aware of them. One can objectify them. And then what is so special about the Shanta vritti? Why should I be in Shanta vritti is given in the next line. However, in the Shanta state of mind, in the state of mind called Sattvika or Shanta, in addition to the consciousness which is there in hearing these vrittis, because these vrittis uphold that consciousness, they are upheld by that consciousness. So, the two vrittis, Ghora and Mudha, are upheld by consciousness. And then what about Shanta? What is it upheld by? That too is upheld by consciousness. What else will it be upheld by? But additionally, in the Shanta vritti, another aspect or a Swarupa, the nature of Brahman, is also manifest. And what is that? That is manifest? Sukham. What is Sukham? Happiness. So this can create some, confusion about what we are talking about. And so therefore we need a little bit of a discussion of what this Brahman is. From Brih, which means to be big. And the word big is what? Is it subjective or objective? It can be very subjective, and also it keeps changing. You say big mountain, you have to look up to see where it is. You say big mustard seed, you have to look down. It's relative. And so here, purposelessly, the word big is sizelessly put there. Big means without any limits. Limitlessly big. Brih, to be limitlessly big. And it has a suffix called manin, that we don't have to go into right now, which makes it Brahman. And so this Brahman, which is limitlessly big, is defined in the Taittiriya Upanishad by the help of three words. What are they? Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. Yeah, these are not adjectival words. They are not qualifying the noun here, in this case Brahman. They are not qualifying the noun just as the words orange, small, fragrant are qualifying the flower. So when I say orange flower, small flower, fragrant flower, the words orange, small and fragrant are used to distinguish this flower from others of its kind. Correct? Yeah. Like big blue, Adi Shankara gives the example of big blue and fragrant lily. Bring me the big lily. But there are so many big lilies, big blue lily. There are so many big and blue lilies. No, the fragrant one. So you see, each adjective is sifting the choices further to distinguish a particular object from others in its own jati or species. That is how the adjective functions. You know, but an adjective has a different, what's the word for it? A different job than a definition. An adjective's job is to distinguish things, you know, from other things of its own class. To distinguish one thing from others belonging to the same class. But the job of a definition, what is the job of the definition? The definition is to distinguish it from everything else. Because the definition is unique. That's why it's called, it defines that particular thing. So therefore, when words like big, blue, fragrant are applied to everything possible, and they are just used to hone in what is it that you want, there are certain other defining words that only fit that particular object. Like even avakasha pradatra akashaha. That which accommodates is space. Can you apply it to anything else, this definition? No, but what about space in a tin? You know, the tin space, but still it is space. That which accommodates cookies, that is also tin space. We call it tin space, but we have to say space, correct? No, but maybe it fits other things also. It doesn't fit anything. It fits only the definition of space. So here the words Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, which define Brahman, are more in the sense of the second example rather than the big blue lily example. They are more to the tune of the space example. And the space alone here is defined by the words that which accommodates. And similarly, Brahman alone is defined by the words Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. And why is that? There is no second source of Satyam. There is no second source of Jnanam. We'll see in a minute what these are. And there is no different source of Anantam either. Brahman being the only thing, there is no need for adjectives to say beautiful Brahman, fragrant Brahman, big Brahman, small Brahman. You don't have to say that. Because the question of distinguishing it from other Brahman does not arise. And why does it not arise? Because there is only one thing of its kind. In fact, it's the only thing. And so therefore, these words are used very cleverly by the Upanishad. And those words are Satyam, that which exists. Flower also exists. Day by day it is, its existence is, Yeah, you see it is all dry here. Before I could just hold it, it would be straight. Now it is, a droopy existence, right? Yeah, sad little droopy existence, see? Yeah. So this existence now, it is very clear that it does not belong to the flower. The existence of the flower is situated elsewhere. It is not the property of the flower, because the is does not belong to the flower. When I say flower is belongs to Brahman. And so what is this flower? A borrowed existence. A borrowed existence where, without giving any interest, the flower borrows freely of Brahman and shines, doesn't pay back. And then when the name and the form called flower, the word and the meaning collapses, goes away, withers, then where does it go to? Where does the is go? Is goes back to Brahman. Goes back means what? It was never, it was never separated from Brahman. So what went away? Brahman did not go away. What went away? The miserable word and meaning called the drooping flower went away. So that's how it is. Yeah, he agrees. So the drooping flower, the Brahman in the form and the name of the flower, and the name and the form being exceedingly dispensable, goes away. And what remains is. So therefore, flower is, flower sat, and then drooping flower sat. Sat means is. And then dead flower sat, dead flower is. And even when you say is not, you have to say absence of the flower is. So it is the is that you cannot get rid of. Even if you use Clorox, it will not go away. Yeah. Even if you try to bleach it out, you try to use the strongest cleaner to rub away this is, it will not go away. Because everything is dependent on this is, and the is self-dependent. It is not dependent on anything else. The is self-dependent. It doesn't need any props to hold it up. And there's only one thing. And what is that? Which has that is? Brahman, you. Really. Because that's why I keep asking the question, and still sometimes people don't understand why I keep asking that favorite question all the time. What is that?
Are you here?
Are you here? Are you here? Because you are not going to go away. You cannot negate that is. And that is happens to be you. And from the point of view of the collective, we call it Brahman. From the point of view of the individual, we call it Atma. But there is only one thing. Don't think there are two things. Atma has to join Brahman. No. It's just a different nomenclature for the same reality from the standpoint of the individual body, mind, sense complex. It is called Atma. And from the standpoint of the Jagat, the manifest universe, the same thing is called Brahman. That's all it is. And so the is never goes away. The is here to stay. The is constantly transforms. It's according to the time and space. It transforms itself in the name and form. Flower goes away, compost is. Dried flower is, compost is. Another flower bush is. Another flower is. Is doesn't go away. So the non-negatable is the meaning of the word Satyam. The unchanging is. So the changes don't belong to the is. When you say flower is and dried flower is, what changes? The flower has undergone a change. The word and meaning, name and form has undergone a change. You don't say dried is flower. You say dried flower is. Is has not dried up. What has dried up? Flower has dried up. So that's why we have another adjective to qualify the state of the flower, but we don't have an adjective to qualify the state of is, because the is not a state. Is that reality on which all states depend. Is self-dependent. It does not require any props. Then may there not be a doubt what kind of a is it? A rock also is, correct? So is it like a rock? No. It is sentient. It's a conscious is. How do we know that the Sat is conscious?
I'm here.
Same thing. You go back to the same question, are you here? And if you need to pinch yourself, pinch yourself. And then when you say yes, that is consciousness. It's in the form of knowledge. The Jagat is nothing but manifest knowledge of Ishvara. The Jagat is nothing but knowledge. Because when you say mountain is, mountain knowledge is. It's all knowledge. There is nothing that is inert and there is nothing that is without knowledge. Because the material of the Jagat, the material which is manifest in the form of this unending universe, it has that consciousness entwined in it, inextricably entwined. So much so that even when you say, I don't think I know Brahman, I don't know Brahman, what you really are saying is, I know that I don't know Brahman. I know that I don't know Sanskrit. I know that I don't know the self, whatever that thing that you're saying. So therefore it is a conscious Sat. It's a Sat that is sentient, alive, and in the form of Prajnana Ghanam. Prajnana Ghanam is just an undifferentiated knowledge, because the kind of knowledge that we have is the knowledge of objects, correct? It's a differentiated knowledge, and let us resurrect, sprinkle some life into this sad flower and bring it back again in the form of this example. So when I say, I know flower, so we have a triad here, knower. Who is the knower? I. Known. What is the known? Flower. And then the process of knowing through the eyes, through the sense organs, and inference, what have you, the means of knowledge. So every knowledge is a differentiated knowledge as it is experienced by the subject when the subject objectifies various things, goes about objectifying various things in this universe. It's a differentiated knowledge. But what about self-knowledge? You cannot say it is differentiated, because how can it be differentiated? It's a self that is, Sat. It's a conscious Sat. And who is the knower? I. Who is the known? I. Who is doing the job of knowing? I. So really there cannot be a differentiation. And because the Sat is self-evident, it is evident to itself, that consciousness is evident to itself. So it's a conscious Sat that is self-evident. You don't need a separation to know yourself. You cannot know yourself as an object. You need not know yourself as an object. Got it? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yeah, show some signs of life. Yeah, that will be good. So, so basically we have a knowledge. That is what is called jnanam. When you say the word knowledge is not really a correct translation like so many other things in Sanskrit. It's an approximate translation. Knowledge here just means a knowing. Sat means being. So Sat Chit or Satyam Jnanam means a knowing being. A being whose knowing is part of the being. An inextricable, impartite part, even though I am constrained to say impartite part. It's an inextricable aspect of this being who happens to be a knowing being. And what are the limits of this knowing being? No limits, which brings us to the third word, Ananta. A limitless being who is a knowing being. And this knowing being has no boundaries of either the being or the knowing. Boundlessly knowing being. Boundlessly being who happens to be knowing. A knowing being who is boundless, timeless. limitless. Who is that? Aham, I. So this is the definition of Brahman. Please understand, this is not the attributes of Brahman. Because in some Vedantic parlance, this mistake is made all the time, thinking that Brahman has three qualities, three attributes. No. All attributes reside as though in which itself is attributeless, attribute free. So this is a very conscious and a pedagogical definition which is designed to remove ignorance on part of those who hear this. So the words are carefully chosen, and certain things are the time-bound nature of the words is knocked off. Like when you say Satyam, that which exists, all existence is in time, correct? So the time aspect is knocked off, and you just take the abstract word which Adi Shankara calls Bhava Sadhana, abstract sense of the word existence, knowledge, infinite, boundless, limitless, timeless. So you take the abstract nouns, rid them of the regular meaning, and therefore, since the self is self-revealing, it just describes the self rather than shows the attributes of the self. It defines the self, it defines Brahman. So this Sat Chit Ananda is in everything. Anything, from a rock to a human being, from a rock to a human being who rocks, it is there. Sat Chit Ananda or Satyam Jnanam Anantam, they are, synonymous. And I have already told you why Ananda has replaced Ananta when describing the Atma. Do you remember that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So because of the human pursuit, and so therefore what happens? Therefore we have this Atma which is Sat Chit Ananda, that's all it is. And this Atma is there in all creation. Again, according to the Taittiriya Upanishad, so kamayat bahusyam praja gegeti satapo tapyat satapastaptva idagam sarvam asrijat yadidam kincha tat srishtva tadeva napravishat tadanu pravishya satchatyacha bhavat. So this being contemplated. What contemplated? There was really no contemplation. It's a projection. And really speaking, we have to account for the projection because people are seeing the duality and asking, what is this Jagat? Mm-hmm. If one understands this, that this Jagat is a projection, then we will not be so interested in knowing the origin of the Jagat. The Jagatvadis, the people who are into finding out the origin of the Jagat, they are, to satisfy them, this kind of a cosmology is given. That this being visualized, contemplated, and as though differentiated into many, and this as though differentiation was accompanied by the entry into all the different things that came out of this being, as it were, thereby refuting the concept of a God that is away from the creation, completely different. So everything is Brahman. That's why we do not have the right to destroy anything. Starting with our own bodies, everything is sacred, everything is Brahman, everything is Sat Chit Ananda. That's why you have to treat the body nicely. You have to treat the mind nicely by keeping it in Shanta Vritti. You have to treat everything nicely. And because everything is sacred, everything has the presence of Brahman, which is Bhagavan for us. And so this Brahman is there in a rock, correct?
Yes.
But the rock cannot say, I rock, right? And ironically, it's the human being who says, I rock. Rock cannot say, I rock. Why? Because it doesn't have a subtle body. The presence of the subtle body or Sukshma Sharira is important for the Chit aspect or the consciousness aspect to be manifest. Because the consciousness needs a medium of expression, which is what? The subtle body. What is the subtle body? The mind, etc. The mind, etc. is the subtle body. So the consciousness needs a medium of expression. And so those things that have the subtle body are able to manifest the Chit or the Jnanam aspect of it. And those things that do not have a subtle body, rock, etc., inert things, the so-called inert things, are not able to express the Chit. But the Chit is very much there, it is latent, it is unexpressed. Like even in a bud, in the rose bud, the flower, the fragrance of the rose is there. But if you smell the rose bud, you don't get it. Why? Because it is latent. It is not actualized yet. And in some things it is never actualized, like the rock. But it is good. The chair, the wood, the table, the microphone, the webcam, all these things, Good. It's good for us that certain things are so-called inert, where the Chit is not manifest, otherwise we won't be doing anything. The chair will start protesting, You're keeping on putting on weight and you're keeping on sitting on me all the time. I don't like you. Why I have to just be the sitting duck here? This is oppression. I feel sat upon. The chair will have its own problems. And then you just do a simple act of eating. The spoon will say, forget feeding you, I am hungry. And you take a spoonful of cereal in the morning, suddenly it disappears. Why? The spoon grew some Chit and then it inhaled your breakfast. And then it will be a very costly, see? When the microphone will say, why should I be your voice? What is it that's so important that you're saying all the time? I too have things to say. And it starts to sing off key, in the middle of the lecture. Then what? This is not fun, correct? And so therefore it is good that in certain, the vyavastha, the arrangement in the Jagat is that certain things are, where the Chit is not manifest, remains unmanifest is okay. That doesn't mean the Chit is not there. It is okay, because for vyavahara, for the sake of transaction, this arrangement is perfect for us. We have no complaints of this arrangement. So then what? So now we are talking of those things in which the Sat and the Chit are manifest, correct? Who are they? The living beings called Jivas. Now and in this very text itself, in the Panchadashi, in the earlier chapters, Swami Vidyaranya talks about how the manifestation of this Chit is not uniform in all the beings. So there are certain life forms, squid, etc. means some simple basic life forms where the Chit is slightly manifest, because it's dependent upon the medium of manifestation. And if the subtle body is a unicellular form like amoeba, what thoughts is it going to have? I think I should divide. That's the only thought it will have. Keeps dividing. Yeah. Unfortunately in the intestines. Causing amoebiosis. That's all it is. So it has the last laugh, even though you think I have, in my mind the Chit is fully blown. I am able to manifest the Chit. What's the big deal? The amoeba has the last word. Yeah, even though it has a single thought, let me keep dividing. That's the only thought. So here too we have a very interesting scenario where the Chit is manifest according to the upadhi. What is upadhi? The form itself. The so-called container for the Sat Chit Ananda is called upadhi. Why do I say so-called container? It is like the space inside the pot. Do you agree that inside what this pot contains is space?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, so like the space inside this pot, we can say, what is this? Small pot space. Leaky pot space. Why leaky pot space? Because this happens to be, I told you yesterday, this is a cracked pot. See the cracks? Yeah, you can see them nicely now. And then now this is what? Big pot space, small pot space. So similarly, the small manifestation of Chit in unicellular animals, for example, organisms, and the bigger manifestation of Chit, and in the human beings, that Chit is, has the potential to be totally manifest. That is what it is. The human being is seen as a special upadhi. The human body, mind, sense complex is seen as a special upadhi, a special form among all the forms. And the basic difference is that while in other forms there is the manifestation of consciousness, that consciousness is still under the programming of Bhagavan, of Brahman. Those forms are still programmed. A dog doesn't say, I have no degree, I have no pedigree, it doesn't cry. It may have a few desires, one more biscuit I want, but it doesn't say, I think I'm going to go in for a PhD. I'm going to analyze the psychology of dogs. It doesn't say that. And so this self-consciousness is completely free in the human upadhi. This is what it is. It is totally free. And that is why the human form is seen as very special, because the free will is totally manifest and consciousness is totally manifest. And so one has the free will to pursue the truth of one's nature. So it's seen as a blessing to be born in a human body. In the other bodies, it is a bhoktru sharira, a sharira where only old papas and old karmas can be exhausted. Bhoga sharira. The human body is a yoga sharira, a place where one can be joined and introduced to oneself, finally. Yeah. Bhoga sharira means it's a wasted life. You are just exhausting some past karma. Yoga sharira, the human body, means you can actually hope to make some strides towards spiritual evolution, to knowing the truth of yourself, to falsifying the cause of these repeated births and these papa punya, all these models. More about that we'll see later. But now do you understand that in certain things Sat alone is manifest because the Chit cannot be manifest? In certain other organisms the Chit is manifest, albeit Ishat. Ishat means slightly. In the human form alone, Sat, Chit, Anand, Sat and Chit are totally manifest. Correct? Yeah. Now the very important question, $1,000,000 question, what about Ananda? Sat and Chit is manifest, all right. But what about this Ananda? Because this Ananda, which means Ananta, which is what? Free of time, free of space, and that which is free of time and free of space is forever, and the forever has to be happy. Why? Why do you say that the forever has to be happy? Because nobody can stand the thought of a dukkha forever, correct? Nobody can stand that thought. What is one wanting when you say, I want the forever? You are wanting sukham, you are wanting happiness. You are not wanting some sadness forever. So when somebody anticipates forever, even in the 7th marriage, the vow is, this time it is forever. What are they wanting? Are they wanting the marriage? No, they are wanting that forever. And are they wanting a sad forever? No. So the forever is always associated with happiness. Therefore, Ananta gets translated into Ananda. when we are talking of the individual Atma, or Atma from the standpoint of the individual Upadhi, that is better put. So the forever gets translated into happiness, Ananda. So now the question is, Sat and Chit are manifest in my body, mind, sense complex, theek hai, that is good. But what about this Ananda? And here is where we can help ourselves, because Swami Vidyaranya in this particular verse says that you know what? You cannot blame Brahman for depriving you of Ananda. You cannot do that. Why? Because you alone are in the charge of manifesting that Ananda which happens to be your Swarupa. You alone are the cause of inhibiting that Ananda which happens to be your Swarupa. Oh, okay, alright, tell me what I have to do to manifest the Ananda. Be in Shanta mode all the time. Oh really? It is that simple? Precisely. Be in Shanta mode all the time. Stop depending on other people and other things to prop up you and your happiness or your state of mind. A. So, I self-propel my own happiness, yes? Because obviously the happiness has to do with the subject or the object. It's very clear. The objects are the object joy. That is how the chapter began. The so-called object joy is nothing but subject joy. And of this subject joy, everybody only experiences a little bit. Why? Because there are inhibiting mental states. And so therefore, those who are experience buffs and want to experience Brahman in its full-fledged form, all one has to do is to be in Shanta mode. Shanta mode. So don't be dependent on others for your joy, or other people or things. And when things don't go your way, don't get into Ghora or Mudha modes. That's all. Easier said than done. So therefore, this verse is very important, where he says that the manifestation of the Sat is there in everything. Chit is also there in the human being. In all the vrittis, Sat, Chit are manifest. But only in the Shanta mode is the happiness manifest. The happiness which is what? Belonging to the subject. The happiness is manifest only in the Shanta mode. In the other two modes, you have the consciousness and you have Sat. That's all. And so, then so how is this possible is explained in verses 6, 7 and 8, and it is concluded in the ninth one. So verses 6 to 9 talk about this in detail. Let us see. Rupam rupam babhuvasau
Rupam babhuvasau
Pratirupa iti shrutihi
Pratirupa iti shrutihi
Upama surya ketyadi
Upama surya ketyadi
Sutrayamasa sutrakrit
Sutrayamasa sutrakrit.
So, this is taken from the Kathopanishad, which will come later, and also from the third Brahma Sutra, this particular verse. And the first line is taken from the Kathopanishad, and the second line from the Brahma Sutra. So, Kathopanishad 2:9 to 10, and Brahma Sutra 3:28 for those who want to know. So, Rupam Rupam Babhuva Asau Pratirupa iti Shrutihi. So, now the Rupam Rupam means in each form, according to Babhuva means entered. Asau. Who is this Asau? the self, Brahman, Pratirupa, and took on that very form. This is just what I quoted in a different way from the Taittiriya Upanishad, that's all. So this Atma entered every form and took on the nature of that form, says the Shruti. And what is the example given? Kathopanishad says that, it entered the mountain and started to look just like the mountain. And it entered the rivers and flowed like the river. There is a whole section there. And it entered the plants and started to gently wave in the wind, just like the plants, behaved like the plants, because everything, the breath of that self is in everything. So therefore, this is from the Kathopanishad. We have already seen that in detail. And then what? Then the second one, Upama. What is Upama? Example. A simile. So what is the example that is given here? Jala Surya Chandravat. So what is the thing is that how did this Brahman enter into various aspects of the creation is just as the sun, which is reflected in 10 parts of water. So when you have 10 parts of water and put it in the bright sunlight, what happens? How many suns you see?
10.
Yeah. So you see as many suns that are there. Correct? And so therefore, and did the sun change to become the pot sun? No. To become the water sun? No. So the pot sun is the same sun. How many suns are really there? One sun. One sun without undergoing any destruction, any fragmentation, any transformation is as though portrayed or as though taken the form of the reflected suns in the various pots. So too, this Brahman remaining itself without undergoing any change, without undergoing any fragmentation, little bit of Sat here, little bit of Chit there, no. Completely manifests itself in all the bodies, that is how it enters the various bodies. And so, let us see now the next one, because the next one is an elaboration of this. एक एव हि भूतात्मा
एक एव हि भूतात्मा
भूते भूते व्यवस्थितः
भूते भूते व्यवस्थितः
एकधा बहुधा चैव
एकधा बहुधा चैव
दृश्यते जलचन्द्रवत्
दृश्यते जलचन्द्रवत्.
Another example. This is from the Amrita Bindu Upanishad. Yeah. This example is from the Amrita Bindu Upanishad. While the previous example had the sun reflected in the various pots of water, this one takes a slightly cooler example of the moon. So, Eka Eva, the one alone Atma, the one self alone, Bhutatma means the Brahman alone. Bhute Bhute Vyavasthitaha. Vyavasthitaha is manifest, where in all the beings. And then Ekadha means while itself being one thing alone, Bahudha in many forms, Drishyate is seen in many forms, like the reflection of the moon in the water. So here there are not pots of water kept under the moonlight. Here there is a body of water. This is a slightly different example. And what is that body of water? Sometimes it is still. And the moon is reflected totally. Sometimes what? It is agitated. So the moon in the water appears to have ripples waves and the moon in the water appears to have some movement, whereas if you look up, that moon, the original moon here, doesn't seem to be moving, but the water moon, the water reflected moon, seems to have a life of its own. Right? So all this to say is that even though the same thing is reflected, whether we are talking of the reflecting medium being the water or the wave or the river or whatever it is, various states of the water, the thing that is reflected totally. Now it is seen differently depending upon the medium of reflection. Correct? Yeah. And this is a particular theory. And what is this? There are two ways in the tradition that talk about the this whole Brahman as though becoming the Jagat, as though becoming, inhabiting various forms, because there is no way to talk about this really. How are you going to say this? So there are two particular theories that are accepted in the tradition, and both of them have shortcomings. Both of them are not total, but we need to discuss them. And in fact, we have discussed these two very clearly, both while studying the 8th chapter of the Panchadashi and before that the Manisha Panchakam. Okay? And so what are these theories? The first one posits, theory means a particular way of looking at it. So the first one posits, it's called Avachheda Vada. Avachheda means it talks about the consciousness which is free, which is limitless, as though being transformed by the upadhis that it inhabits. Ghata avachinna akashaha, the space that is as though limited by being pot space. Deha avachinna chaitanya. Chaitanya means consciousness. This consciousness that is as though limited by the parameters of the body. Consciousness which is all pervasive is never limited. That's why I keep using the words as though. This is an explanation to see and to discern why this free and limitless consciousness, why does it behave as though it is limited? As soon as it enters a body-mind-sense complex, it takes on that form. We have seen that through the two Shrutis. But why does it behave so limited? It's supposed to be all pervasive and limitless. But then, as soon as it enters this miserable Jiva's form, what happens? It takes on that very form and it doesn't seem to have any mobility. It stops being all pervasive. It stops being all knowing because it is muted, because it has the mind of a mosquito now, because it has entered the mosquito body. And the mosquito's only thought is, what shall I bite next? That's all, And so therefore, it takes on the very form of the thing that it enters. And so it seems to have, It seems to have given up its nature. But it's not given up its nature. Like the space hasn't given up its nature even as it is entering this pot. Has the space in the pot given up its nature? No. It is still the pot space and the space around it, they have an identity, correct? They have an identical nature. The space around the pot accommodates, the space in the pot also accommodates. What can it accommodate? Maybe it will accommodate this flower. That's why we can say flower pot. And so the space, here also accommodates, the space there also is accommodative, and the space around the pot is free. The space in the pot is also free. It doesn't have to break the pot or shake itself out of the pot. Come on, let me come out, let me break the pot in order to be free. In fact, there is only one space. From the point of view of the pot, we say pot space. From the point of view of the room, We say room space, tin space, stomach space, head space. That's why one says, I feel spaced out. That's all it is. So really speaking, there's only one space. And it appears to have taken the form of the very thing that it enters, like even this space. And if the space had a human mind and was sitting in this small little pot, definitely it would be miserable. That's why it would need to study the Panchadashi. Why? Because it would be feeling sorry for itself. Ayyo, kya ho gaya? What happened to me? Before I used to be space, now I am, spaced out. And then therefore it needs a space guru, not a spaced out guru, okay? Yeah, it needs a space guru to say, you are nothing but space. So that it can enjoy being in the pot, because the pot is mithya. The pot cannot, be defining of the space. In fact, what do you say? Pot is in space or space is in pot?
Pot in space.
Pot is in space. So that is what the Guru will give Upadesha. This is Pato Upanishad. Ghato Upanishad. Ghata means pot. So what will the Pato Upanishad sound like? Pato Upanishad will say that you are space, you are not pot. You think you are pot, but you are space. You are nothing but space. In fact, pot lives in you. You don't live in the pot. And so too, when you translate it to this reality, to the human body, mind, sense complex, what do you find? You find that same thing is here. That same all-pervasive, never-ending, Sat, unchanging, non-negatable, all knowledge, limitless existence is living in this limping body, mind, sense complex. And you have to add a big as though somewhere in the sentence. Is as though living in this body, mind, sense complex. And just like the pot doesn't have to break itself in order to set the space free, I don't have to die or cease to exist in this body, mind, sense complex to be set free. I don't have to destroy the container. Without destroying this container or without putting an end to the container, the body doesn't have to die in order to set that Chaitanya free. It is already free. So therefore, this is what is called, this is one particular way of looking at the whole thing. And this, in the tradition, it is called Avachcheda Vada. Avachcheda means Avacchinnatvam, the as though limitations. When the Atma, as quote unquote, entering itself into various beings and taking on their very form, also appears to be taking on the limitations of those forms. This is very interesting. Appear. This is an apparent reality. So in the mosquito, the Atma, is a single thought Atma. What shall I bite next? In the amoeba again, it's a single thought Atma. How to divide. And in the plant, again, basic thought Atma. In the human being, a much more, because the mind is much more fully developed, so much more fully, freer Atma, it seems, in the human upadhi, in the human incarnation. And so like this, there are so many gradations. And so this particular view is called Avachcheda Vada, this particular way of looking at it. It again has problems, because you have to keep saying as though. Yeah. Only we have to be careful, you don't say as though Brahman. That's all. Up to Brahman you keep saying as though. And look at how how elaborately you have to say this. Correct? To be made to understand that. And it has some problems, and we can look at those later. And now coming to the second view of how to explain this whole thing is called the Pratibimba Vada, the theory of reflection. So one is the theory of as though limitation. And here also let us give the benefit of doubt there and say the theory of as though reflection. So one is called Avachedavada, the other one is called Pratibhimbavada. Do you remember this? We studied in Manisha Panchakam? Yeah. I remember. So then we have, what is this Pratibhimbavada? Pratibhimbavada posits that this whole Jagat is nothing but a reflection of Satchit Ananda. And just like if it's a big cauldron of water, the reflection will be also big of whatever it is. And if it's a small little thimble of water, the reflection will be again small, will appear small. Without changing the size of the original sun, the reflection is different depending on the size of the pots, the quality of the water, whether it's clear or turbid, and whether it is moving or unmoving. So now the expression of that Brahman depends upon the medium of reflection. And the medium of reflection translated as nothing but the mind. The mind is the medium of the reflection. So depending upon how well the mind is developed and how well how still the medium of reflection is, that much Brahman can reflect. This also has problems because the reflecting medium becomes an important part of the reflection. So the reflecting medium is not yet one more reality. All there is one reality. So this is one of the problems of Pratibhimbavada. And Avachedavada we have already seen. It is not complete because neither of these views are complete, because what we are trying to communicate is that really which cannot be communicated through these descriptions. That which is yourself alone. So any kind of imagery that you use is going to fall short. So we live with both these kinds while being aware of their fallacies. We continue to use them, and both of them are accepted ways of looking at, how at the quintessential question, how did Brahman become the Jagat? Brahman did not become the Jagat. Brahman remains Brahman effortlessly, just like you project your dream, the knowledge and the existence, it lends its knowledge and existence to all that there is, as it were. Okay? And so now if we look at these two verses which we have just looked at closely, you will find that the first verse, Rupam Rupam Babhuvasau, the first line of the first verse, is talking about Avachedavada. The first line of verse 6 and the first line, of verse 7. Both of them are talking about the Atma, as it were, entering into various body, mind, sense complexes without really undergoing any change. Whereas the second lines in those two verses are talking about Pratibhimbavada, where they are talking about the whole reflection. Can you see that? Yeah. So now, verse number 8. Jale pravishtaschandroyam
Jale pravishtaschandroyam
aspashtah kalushe jale
aspashta kalushe jale
vispashto nirmale tadvat
vispashto nirmale tadvat
dvedha brahma pivrittishu
dvedha brahma pivrittishu
dvedha brahma pivrittishu
dvedha brahma pivrittishu Tishu.
Yeah. Jale pravishtaha chandraha ayam. Ayam chandraha. So now we, the Panchadashi Kara, the person who wrote the Panchadashi, Swami Vidyaranya, has a small preference, even though he tries to be very fair, for this reflected business. Yeah. He likes to use that reflected consciousness metaphor a lot. Pratibimbavada, he has a small preference. And so, he uses that quite a bit. He is comfortable there because it can, according to him, it can very clearly show what he wants to show here. And what he wants to show is why people should be in Shanta Vritti in order to, quote unquote, experience the happiness which is Brahman. So therefore, for him this is much more convenient rather than looking at Avachedavada. So here he is saying, this is not from the Upanishad, he says this here in verse number 8. He has stopped quoting and verse number 8 is himself. So he says, for example, there are two kinds of water. One is a sludgy, muddy body of water. And the other one is a clear body of water. And let us visualize that they are sitting side by side, these two bodies of water. And they are reflecting what? The moon. They are reflecting the moon. Moon is being reflected in a turbid, sludgy body of water and in a body of water that is clear. So just as you will see two moons, you will see a dirty moon and then you will see a clear moon. Correct? Mm-hmm. So too, in the vrittis, the Ananda aspect appears distorted or is reflected clearly depending upon which mode of, which state of mind one is in. Depending on one's state of mind, Brahman is therefore seen in two ways. Turbid, so even that Ananda is distorted to sadness. Why? Because there is a lot of klesha. What is klesha? Klesha means heaviness, turbidity, all kinds of things from the past hanging on in the recesses of the mind. Fears, pains, sorrows, all these things. And what do? They become, the mind becomes a medium, and the nature of the mind defines how that Brahman enters, the entry of Brahman in that mind, as though entry. And so therefore even the limitless Brahman appears sad and limited because of the turbidity. And the turbidity is nothing but uninterrogated ragadveshas, uninterrogated unconscious, and all the childhood fears, fear of authority, fear of God, fear of so many things. All these things make up the reflecting medium. And it is in my hands to clear the reflected medium. It is going to say that later. It's not in Bhagavan's hands. Bhagavan's grace is perhaps needed. But I am the one in charge of cleaning up this pond, which is the mind. When I clean up the mind pond, then I don't have to ponder where this happiness has gone. I don't have to ponder at all because it is right there. It's just not clearly seen. On the other hand, someone who is in Shanta Vritti has the turbidity has gone down, has settled. It's not that you are trying to remove the turbidity. The turbidity is the unconscious. The unconscious cannot be removed really because it is part of one's being. But the unconscious has sunk to the bottom where it is no longer a source of disturbance. Because the inner child has been, or rather the inner children, maybe the inner brats, have been reckoned with, have been dealt with, have been loved up and integrated. So the unconscious does not catch one off guard. It is there, but it is just there like even the little being at Dakshinamurti, Lord Dakshinamurti's foot. What is that? Apasmara. It looks like a baby, but if you go close, it has a dagger and a shield, offensive and defensive, this ninja being, which is the unconscious. But it is at the foot of the Lord. That Lord is nothing but all knowledge. And so my own knowledge, which knowledge? Self-knowledge, stops it from coming up. It is the turbidity has sunk to the bottom, trapping all the, seaweeds and other things. It has just sunk to the bottom. And then in that you see, you gain the benefit of the cool reflection of the moon of self-knowledge, which is very nice and free of disturbance. So the first one is what? Ghora vritti, correct? The turbidity is Ghora vritti. And what is not said here, we have to just, bring in, we have to extrapolate here, is that a disturbed water, the water that is constantly disturbed in the form of ripples by the wind, the moon also looks disturbed. And the disturbance here is, the turbidity is Mudha vritti, the disturbance is Ghora vritti. A wind-blown water where the water is agitated, and the moon also looks fragmented, agitated, rippled, disfigured and distorted. So the turbidity is Mudha vritti, the tamasic vritti, and the disturbed moon is the Ghora vritti. And the Shanta vritti is already mentioned here, which is that the pond where all the turbidity has sunk and where there is no disturbance, where the external winds of fortune and the winds of encountering the Jagat do not cause disturbance. There is a beautiful story which the Zen monk tells, Thich Nhat Hanh tells this, that one lady came to him very upset and said, I have been asking you to give me this knowledge and teach me about this. But each time I ask, you just send me to various chores. You say, look after the bookstore. You say, go do this, go do that. And she was very angry. When am I going to, when are you going to teach me? When are you going to take me on as a student? She was very upset. So all he did, he was very quiet. And, she was talking to him while she was drinking a glass of water. He took the glass of water and mixed some dirt and took a stick and stirred the dirt into it and kept on looking at it. And then she was very intrigued. She said, what are you doing? He said, I'm waiting for everything to settle down. So they sat quietly looking at it. She also thought, okay, there is a teaching happening, better just sit and look. And surely, 5 or 10 minutes later, all the turbidity that had been, disturbed by the stirring stick settled down and the clear water rose to the surface. And then he said, when the mind is like this, it will be able to take in the teachings. So like that, this is the whole thing. The Shanta vritti is indispensable, not just to have a modicum of sanity in one's life, but also for the pursuit of knowledge. So really, in a very nice way, Swami Vidyaranya has given back to the person who is seeking this knowledge the responsibility and the commitment of keeping the mind in a place of joyous receptivity to the knowledge. More we will see next Tuesday. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Any questions? Yeah.
Well, this is an experience I had. I think we talked about this last year. I was getting this, I guess it was kind of an initiation by this Rajasthani women in Pushka. And it was a full moon night, and I had to do all these rituals of cleansing and whatnot, and henna on the hands and feet. And then they took me out where we saw the full moon above the Saraswati hill, and they had a pot of water, and they poured water out, and I saw the Saraswati hill and the moon reflected in the water, but the hill was upright instead of upside down. So what kind of state of mind did that reflect?
Why would the hill be upside down?
Is in the reflection, everything is upside
Yeah,
down.
The hill was upright. In the flowing water, the hill will be upright. When the water is
on
being
the ground,
poured.
it was
Yeah,
upright.
when the water, because the water was being poured.
It was in the puddle.
Oh,
that
it was in the
upright.
puddle. I don't know. That I cannot answer. That was something, your own experience, so you have to say. I have no idea. Yeah.
Huh.
Any other question? Interesting though. Yeah. Yes.
In verse 6, the reference is made of the sun, and then in 7 and 8, it's the moon. And the moon is a reflection of the sun. Is it significant that the moon is used in the last two?
No. Two
It's
different examples.
not- Okay.
Sometimes the Upanishad likes to use the example of either the sun or sun because it's similar to self-effulgence, and the moon because you can actually look at it and enjoy it. It's cooling. So that's all. No connection. Yeah. We don't go there. The moon itself is a reflection because it's not from the same Upanishad. Two different Upanishads. Yeah. Good point, however. Anything else? Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let me see if there is any other question. No. Wonderful. So today evening we have Kaivalya Upanishad at 6 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time in Eugene, Oregon, United States. Oh.